What is up, ninjas? My name is Sam World and welcome to the complete guide to master Diva. Now, in the previous episode, we talked about envelopes and how they can be used as a modulation source, as well as how they can be used to shape a sound. Now, in today's video, we're going to look at the next modulation source, which is the LFO, which you're going to be able to find in most synths out there. And LFOs are great for adding movement to a sound, as well as making sound interesting, making pads sound interesting. Again, just think movement and loopable compared to an envelope. With that being said, guys, if you want to support the channel, make sure you head over to evilsounds.com where you can find a lot of Serum sound sets. Like I've stated, I'll eventually make some for Diva, but for now, we'll keep it to Serum. So now let's get straight into this tutorial, guys. All right, guys, welcome inside of Diva. So we're just going to initialize the first patch here to a Init Mini Mono. You can really pick whatever you want for this. And we're going to go to the bottom left of Diva where we're going to find our LFO section. Now, LFO1 bracket vibrato close bracket, all that means that vibrato, and that might throw some people off, is that it's hardwired to this vibrato knob here. So LFO1 is naturally routed there by default. And then LFO2 bracket mod close bracket, as you can see, is just going to be mod, meaning that LFO2 has already been routed to some parameters here. So you can see LFO2 here on the filter and LFO2 here on the shape mod, which, as you guys know, the shape mod is altering this, and this guy is going to be altering the filter cutoff. With that being said, we're going to talk straight away with LFO1 to learn the LFO. And then talk a little bit about how to utilize it, okay? So the first thing, guys, is, like I said, this is routed to our vibrato, so let's utilize this vibrato up, and we'll put it up. Now, like I stated, LFOs are used to add movement to a sound, so it's safe to say this should make the sound a little different. Okay, so it doesn't sound that great. And that's because the vibrato effect is usually applied to the pitch of the sound, aka the tune mod here. We're essentially moving the pitch at a really slow rate right now. So it's looking like something like this. So it sounds like it's going out of key, back in key. The key to this effect, if you want to add it, is to have a high rate. So that's where this guy comes, the speed of the LFO. Okay, so you can see that's like dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. You're adding that movement to it. So the rate, okay, the speed, that's usually what the rate is going to be. Okay, so that vibrato knob is hardwired. So again, you can also do it through here, and we'll talk about that later. But let's move that vibrato down now. So now I'm going to use the filter cutoff here. So let's say I wanted to route LFO1 somewhere, then I would have to click on these modulation parameters. For instance, here I could turn this into LFO1, and LFO1 is routed to that guy, and then we can go positive. So I'm going to be utilizing the filter cutoff just to teach you guys the LFO section a little better so you can actually hear the movement that is added to a sound. From here, let's lower down the rate. And let's get straight into it, okay? So the first important thing here that we're going to discuss is the waveform. So the waveform you pick is going to determine how abrupt or how smooth or how random or how steppy the modulation is. A sine wave is usually the more desired modulation that you're going to hear when you're trying to add like tasteful movement to a sound without it sounding too noticeable. Or if you're just trying to get like a wee 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 kind of wub effect, then you could go with a sine. Now we know a sine looks like this. It goes gradual up and then all of a sudden boom down and then gradual back up and then boom. So it's like a wave. And it's going to sound something like this. Okay, if we increase the rate. That's how it's going to essentially sound like. So, you know, if you wanted to make, let's say, like a Swedish. Now I'm going to turn this legato into polymo just to play some chord. Okay, so that's going to be the sine wave. Now, from there, we move on to the triangle wave, which triangle is going to be gradual up, gradual down. One of the smoother ones that we can utilize. And if you wanted to make some sort of wubs, this is probably the one I would use. So we're just making like a classic kind of squarish wub, which again, you can hear in some night-based, UK-based kind of stuff, and then you can process further. From there, we move up to the saw up. So the effect of that is going up, going straight down. Okay, so Saw down is the more traditional one. If you've heard any sort of dead mouse track where there's like some kind of chords playing. Of course, we want to pick a saw for this, but you get the idea there. We could do. Okay, so that's going to be the saw down. It starts from really high up, straight down. Then we have a square high, low, and a square low, high. So the square is a pulse wave. So it looks something like, you know, straight down, then straight up all of a sudden. So whenever you're trying to create sort of like gator effects, then this is going to be the one you want to go with. This is going to give you that kind of squarey, sort of like toot, 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 toot. So when you route it to, let's say, like a pitch. So we're going to do that here. Move this to LFO 1. It's going to be very, very like lowest value to the highest value. No in between. So essentially what's going on there is we're staying at the right key, but then it's going up to whatever the tune one I've set to, the amount I've set to. And that's how the square, low, and high work. It's just depending on where it's starting. From there, we have a random hold, which is super good if you're trying to make modular sort of sounds. So what this means is, for instance, here in the pitch, I'm going to put it up. I'm going to have a low rate. It's very steppy. So again, if you're trying to make modular kind of stuff, this is probably the one you're going to want to use. So it's very random. And then from there, we have a random glide, which is just a lot smoother. So if you notice the attack on it, it's not like, it's like wop, 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 sort of like wubbish. Okay, and that's going to be our waveforms that we can utilize. Okay, so again, waveforms are very important when using LFOs, and I think just experimenting with what works for you is best. But as long as you understand the sine triangle are more gradual, the saw up and saw down are going to be inverses. So saw down is very doom from highest value down to low. And there is a change that happens. A saw up is the reverse of that. So it's good for wubs too that are just like whoop, but no wow to it. Then I think you kind of get, remember, this is going to be applied to certain stuff, values, and that's very important that you understand that as you can go further from there. Now to the right of our waveform, we reach a very important part of the LFO, and that is going to be the restart. So when does the LFO restart? For instance, if I put a gate, when I play, let's say, a chord, if I switch notes, you can see that each sort of, every time I switch notes, each note kind of has its own LFO, so it doesn't stay in sync together. But if I go to sync and I go, and then I decide to play another note, they're in sync. From there, we have the single, which is very similar to the sync, but the single is just going to restart the LFO as soon as all the notes are released. So if I'm going like, I let go of all the notes, the LFO is going to restart then. And then from there, we have a random where I think it's very self-explanatory. I'm playing them at the same time, but as you can see, each one sort of has like a random LFO to it. So again, that's going to work more with poly, because honestly, if you're in legato mode, which just means you can only play one note at a time, then it doesn't really matter much. But I usually go with the sync, I'm not going to lie, unless you're trying to do some very like complex sort of patterns and you want that effect, then you go with the gate. And other than that, sync or single. To the right of that, we have, from there, we have the sync, which is the timing of this rate. So when I click on this rate, it's going to set it to 12 o'clock. And that's going to be the value this is set to. So if I want a 1/4 modulation, which is like the kick, boom, 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 this is where I'm going to do it. So if we add it to the LFO, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Now the thing that's weird here, and again, rate is the speed of the sound of the modulation, is that I can still go up. But my 12 o'clock is set to this value here, which is what's going to make it easy. 1/8. Okay, and you start to get the idea. And then we're going to have here different timings. We have our dotted, which again is more swingy than our other counterparts. So again, you can kind of play around with that there, but this is where you're going to do it. So for us, we'll leave it at 1/16. do some really fast ones. Okay, now to the top left of the LFO, we're gonna have a phase. So if you remember the phase of a sine, you know, and it just keeps repeating. The thing the phase is where do I want to start when the LFO is reset? So do I want to start in the middle of the sine wave? Do I want to start at the beginning? Notice it's a lot more punchier because we're starting at the top here. It's going through. So 12 o'clock will probably be at the bottom of a sine wave in between. So you can see there's a change. But this is where you're going to mess with the phase, where you want to start on the triangle at the very tip, or at the very bottom, etc. To the right of that, we do have a delay. And the cool thing about the delay is, let's say that, you know, we're going to come back to this vibrato here. And let's say, you know, we're going to go 116 with the vibrato. The delay will delay the effect. So for instance, if I'm playing, and then it's slowly applied in, down, instant. Delay up. It takes a minute to come in, and you can go high. I believe the delay works up to like 20 seconds. So in an LFO, you can kind of hold it off until a certain part, maybe like is reached like 4 seconds, etc. But the delay is useful for that. Let's say I want to play a melody, but I don't want the vibrato effect to come in until I hit a certain note, for instance. You know, I want to do it on that blues tone. Okay, it sounds a little... Okay, then that's what the delay is for. We talked about the rate, which is the speed. Okay, so now we get into the last two knobs that we have here in the LFO section. And these can be a little confusing, but I'll try my best to explain. First off, we have a rate mod and a depth mod. And what these guys are going to be are modulations that you can apply on the LFO. The depth knob is definitely very interesting, and I like to use it whenever, you know, let's say I want the modulation to occur when I activate it. So for instance, the more popular that people use is a mod wheel. So if you have a MIDI keyboard, which I don't, I have like a damn synth over here, but if you put up the mod wheel, you activate the LFO a little bit more harder. So what that means is here, we're going to create a MIDI channel real fast inside of Diva, or sorry, inside of Ableton here. And we're just going to set what note, like a little, you know, we'll just record a little kind of motif. Okay, and now from there, I can go into, and I think it's going to be found here. We'll just double click there. We're going to go into our envelope section, and then we can go into MIDI control, and we can go into number 1, modulation. From there, we can kind of control this sort of depth knob. Now, this is assuming that this is the mod wheel that we're going to be utilizing here. And we're going to activate the vibrato, let's say here. So now we can go up. So if you have a MIDI keyboard, the cool thing about this is that you activate it with the MIDI keyboard. So this is how you can get a little bit more musical, a little bit more performance in your music, which sounds more humanizing, is you can play a melody and then you put the mod wheel up. Now, usually Ableton, as you're recording, will record as you move the mod wheel up. So this is really good for adding, you know, those little intricacies, making your music sound more alive and not so robotic. Okay, so this is super cool because now check it out. Now that I have those modulations set, I can now move LFO 1, right? Okay, and that controls that. So if my depth mod is set high, even though this LFO 1 is set all the way up, it's not doing anything until I push that mod wheel up. And as I gradually move that mod wheel up, the depth, again, how much the LFO is affecting that starts to increase, which is super clutch. And again, most analog synths like the Moogs and stuff will have that mod wheel hard routed to an LFO that, let's say you have two one of them that you can route to the pitch, to the cutoff, I believe to the wavetable, and from there, if you have a semi-modular Moog synth, then you can start patching and routing to other specific parts. Maybe you want to alter like PWM or do a bit of the frequency modulation that we talked about, etc. That is what this depth mod is for, which leads me to the rate mod, which again, the rate mod is going to alter this rate here, negative or positive. So I'll give you guys an example. We can maybe go ditch this guy here. We don't need you anymore. So let's just put it down. So it's going to be constantly doing the modulation. But let's say I want this to be more of one of those kind of like effects that you tend to hear in tech house nowadays. We'll go with a saw, detune a bit. Okay, and we don't want any vibrato for this. Okay, now let's say I want to do that effect, and here I can go envelope 2. We're not going to use envelope 2 for anything. And then we can increase the speed, and then we use ADSR for this. So personally, I'll go with an analog envelope to do this modulation. I find it's a lot easier. And from there, we can add attack, which is going to make this guy slowly come up, as you can see there. And if I have the sustain set, you guys know the sustain is a value. As long as the note is held, it's going to stay at that value. So let's say we have our attack. It reaches this peak. Again, sustained. That's the value. Now, if I put this down, then I can create the tech house effect I was talking about now, like this. We're in our decay phase now, and it's going down to the sustain. Okay, so that's how we create that effect. If you have no attack, then we go to max value, what the rate is. And then the decay is the only one that's doing anything. So we're going from, again, remember, attack's going to the max amplitude, the max modulation, and then the decay starts setting it down back to where we begun in our modulation here, our rate. But that's the cool thing about the rate mod and what you would want. You could also route that to the module as you're moving it up. Then you can kind of have that as well. But again, just some nice stuff. And again, here you're going to have Control A, Control B, envelope 2, your gate. And the gate is just whenever you switch notes, key follow. So as you go higher up in the keys, then you might get higher rates in the modulation. And then you have a separate key follow 2, which might be the opposite of that. You can route its own LFO into it, LFO 2, the mod wheel, the pitch wheel, pressure, velocity. So velocity is the input when you have your melodies here. You can kind of set how the rate is going to be depending on how hard you're hitting the note. So if we go here, the velocity values are down here, so I can switch those as well. Not going to get into it just because this video will be too long going over each one, of course, but that's usually what you kind of want to do with that. So now that we've gone over the more common modulation sources, below that we're going to have the more Diva-ish or Yuhi-ish ones, because I've only seen these in the Yuhi Basil and the Yuhi Diva. And here we're going to have an add, which is going to add 2 modulation sources together, which for this section doesn't really make any sense. However, if let's say you have an LFO here, and you want to add this, then you can. The thing is that for me, I'm having issues sort of figuring out how that ad's going to work. I mean, it adds 2 modulation sources together, but if you guys know, you can leave it down in the chat below, or sorry, in the comment. From there, we have an alternate. So if I were to apply that on the filter, obviously my LFO1 modulation is going to go from here, maybe down to here, and sorts. However, if I add this into what we're talking about today, which is going to be the rate mod section, we're going to alternate between heavy extreme values, the highest we can go. For instance, I'll give you guys here. We'll put the rate here. Really fast. So we're alternating between maybe going here, 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 here. You get the idea with the alternate. Then we have an invert. Going to invert any modulation source that enters. So this is something you're going to use most likely on here, not on an LFO. Then we have a lag, which is supposed to round out a square. That's what the Diva manual states. So it kind of makes, let's say you have a very fast modulation that occurs and you're getting clicks, and you might add a bit of a lag to get rid of those clicks. From there, we have a multiply 2, quantize, etc. Random, which I think that one would work if you want to add a bit of randomness to this modulation. So you're kind of getting different rate mods here, 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 etc. Okay, and then we have a rectify, and then the voice map, which is the one I kind of wanted to talk about because I find this one very interesting. The voice map inside of Diva, you're going to find the trimmer section here. It's going to have the voice map here. And the only way it works is when you're in poly mode, because as you're going to notice, as we're in poly, we play one note. And as we go to the right, we're playing different. Now, the cool thing here is below this, you're going to have a voice map modulator, which you can set to different values. And what this is going to do is work in conjunction with this voice map. So here you're going to be able to set high value, low value, and high. So now as I play, we're going to route this here to the cutoff. Which is very unique. For instance, if I'm playing like an ARP, I can be very tasteful about the way that I'm doing this. And this isn't the only place you can put this. Let's assume that you want a certain kind of vibe to this, and you can route this to, let's say, a voice map to your cutoff here. For instance, we'll have that. Let's lower down the vibrato trimmer. I can make each note move the filter in a different way. For instance, I could go here. So if I'm playing like an ARP, I think that's beautiful. Now let's assume you want this to be more like in sync, then just put 4 voices. And that's the very clutch thing about it. So again, those are going to be some of the other modulation sources we'll have inside of Diva. And we'll talk again about the trimmer section a lot more in depth another time. But I think it already makes sense if you get the idea of that. Okay, guys. And finally, the last thing we have is polarity. Now, usually an LFO will be bipolar, which means it goes in positive value and negative value. If you turn polarity on, it only goes unipolar, which means it's going in one direction. This really does affect the way something sounds, because the problem here, if we have a triangle, the triangle is going up to max amplitude and down. However, if this polarity is down, then we're going from cutoff down here, up, down here, up, while when polarity is set on, we're going up, down to the starting point, up, down to the starting point, okay? That's what the polarity is for. So again, you can use it for various different things, but that's going to be essentially the LFO section. So with the LFO section out of the way, let's make a couple of sounds utilizing LFOs. I'm going to go with a Juno 60. I'm going to run this little patch you see here, a chord and a minor, so I can play some beautiful kind of chords. Let's lower the output down. Okay, and the first thing, I'm going to lower the cutoff on this, just to kind of get sort of like a pad. From there, I'm going to add LFO 2 to add a bit of movement to the sound. Again, I want to put this in sync, not gate, so that it's all together. From there, let's say I want to add a bit of movement to this. I'm going to go for more of a bar, and I'm going to add the rate at 12 o'clock so that my rate's set the same way. From there, I'm going to add this to a couple things, LFO. Can maybe even go a bit further than 1. Let's do maybe, let's see if there's maybe 2 to 1. So that's 2 bars. And now let's play some chords here. Now, if you notice, this is going down. I don't want that. I just wanted to go up. So I'm going to use the polarity now. From there, let's mess with the... here, LFO 2 is on the PW. I'm going to route LFO 1 to the pitch. High rate. We're going to go 1/4. Okay, so that's what we get right now. Now from there, I can go and create a Reese utilizing LFO 2 on the PWM here. So I'm going to use a very fast rate for this, maybe 1/16. We're not going to use a saw, just square that PWM. That is going to allow me to... There we go. And let's go mono mode. can maybe increase this a bit. So we're in this kind of patch, we're making the square move at a very fast rate, the PWM, which creates a Reese. So in some sense, you wouldn't be able to detune, obviously, like I think the Juno 6 or whatever that Juno is. So this is how you would kind of get those detuned sort of Reese sounds at the bottom. Gonna increase some of the boost. We're gonna move this to the right, envelope 2, so we can get some nice sort of yeah, so analog down, we'll do doom, doom. We're gonna move more of a stab with it. There we go. We're gonna PWM the saw as well. Okay, maybe a little noise. The release, I'm letting go of notes. It's a little long, so let's move that down. Now we can make it even punchier. And we could use this for various different kind of... I'm gonna cheat. Gotta add the plate. You gotta add it. For this last sound, let's get a little bit more complex. So we're gonna make sort of like something with this art from the new Karma Techno pack. So what I'm gonna do is maybe LFO2, we can mess with the cutoff here, have a high kind of emphasis on it. So LFO2 is gonna be there by default. So let's make the waveform be random and hold. And we're gonna route maybe a 1/4. So that way we get more like of that modular-ish stuff to it. Make it bipolar because I want it going up. I don't want it to sound low. Okay, from there we can add LFO2 to other things. So if I wanted to make something that's not in key, then I could do LFO2 on this guy. Pitch, tune mod. Now, as I'm doing that change, we can maybe add a bit of FM from 1. So let's go here like that. You can also do a sync. That sounds interesting. And as I'm doing that, LFO2 can also get it. And from there, LFO2, this can go higher. Let's go faster. And then let's see more rotate. And now here, envelope 2, we can make this go open. Let's add a bit of release and poly it. Let's see how that sounds like. Oh, Lord have mercy. Let's try random and glide, which is again just more slight attack. Now, with that out of the way, guys, that's how I would utilize LFOs to add movement to a sound. Again, if you're trying to make intricate stuff, definitely LFOs for movement, etc. Keeping it basic sometimes is the better thing. As you guys saw, just simple stuff can go a very far way in making your sound unique. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. I hope that this kind of helps and shines light on the LFO section, and I'll catch you guys next time for another video. You guys take care and peace out.